YouTube. So right now, this video is being streamed to YouTube. If you have a phone, you can actually watch the lecture with about, I think it's about a 15-second lag behind, but it's actually kind of cool. Okay, so with that in mind, I need to write one thing on the whiteboard that is not going to be recorded, because otherwise it's going to be a chicken and egg problem. So I'm just going to write down my channel name on YouTube. You might want to write it down. Okay? If you only have enough pencil lead or ink to write down one thing, write that down. Okay? Because you can get to the video from that link, so you can basically rewatch the entire lecture from there. Okay? Are we good so far? All right, cool. So you will probably see me standing up and then sitting down again, sitting down again, because in my usual lecture room, those are all standing desks, or at least they can extend to the height where I can stand. So I'm much more used to standing than sitting, during my lecture. But as you can see, this is not one of those configurable, desks. So until I get, well, I suppose the cable is not long enough. I didn't bring my VGA cable today, so this one is not long enough for me to put a podium under my computer. So I'll just be standing and sitting and standing and sitting a lot. So don't let that distract you. All right? Okay, so everything in this class are distributed through Canvas. There are no textbooks to purchase. Okay, so you're absolutely right. There's no textbook to purchase. I write all the material for this class, which is good and bad. The good thing is you don't have to pay. The bad thing is you get what you pay for. Yeah, you can return it. Okay. Yeah, as long as it's not like ripped into pieces. Yep, you can just return it. Yep, you can go ahead and return that. So, any questions about anything up to here, up to this point? No questions? Okay, so I'm going to go over the syllabus. And the syllabus is broken up into two pieces. The first piece is things that are only specific to this class, and that's why it's called section-dependent information. And by the way, everything is accessible through Canvas. So as long as you're enrolled in this class, you have access to all of the stuff that you see on the projector. Is that okay? If you have a laptop computer with you, you can actually follow along. A lot of the stuff you can actually click on as well. All right, so we'll just go over some of the really obvious stuff that is actually that is section dependent. The first part, I don't think we have to go over that because you're here already, so you know the right place, the right time. Okay, and I hope this is the class that you want. Okay, if you're not enrolled in cisp300, you might want to leave now. Okay, I don't mind people sitting in my classes, but I just thought if this is the wrong class for you, it may not be a good use of your time. Okay. One thing that is worth noting is this is a 3-unit class. So you guys have all taken 3-unit classes, right? But they're usually semester long and not 1/2 of a semester. So when a class that is usually a semester long and is compressed to only half a semester, things get a lot more compressed. Okay, so we're going to move along pretty quickly in this class. In other words, it is equivalent to taking a 6-unit class, but only for 8 weeks. Okay, so I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Okay, personally, I really like Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes because there's a long period of time between the Thursday or the Tuesday class, or between the Wednesday and the Monday class. But on the other hand, it's really difficult to catch up with this class if somebody is falling behind. All right. So the next section here is what we call the SLO, or Student Learning Outcome. Basically, these are the things that you should be able to do by the time you finish this class with a passing grade. So I'm not going to go over that because that kind of defeats the whole purpose of the class. And then we have a tentative schedule of topics. I don't really follow the topic very strictly. So if I'm off by a little bit or off by maybe even a week, don't worry. I will get everything that is important into the class for sure. Okay. Some of these things may not be as important. So as we get through the semester, I'll let you know, which part is kind of like, yeah, this stuff you can learn it on your own, but some other stuff is much more important. All right. So moving on like that. So there's nothing really too important here. And then the next one is my actual syllabus, which I use for all of my classes. So it's not just for this class, but it's also used for all of my other classes. I'm going to zoom in a little bit because this screen is a little small. And I'm going to go through this kind of step by step. And section 2 basically says why my syllabus is not inside Canvas itself. And the reason is we have changed learning management system several times, and every single time we change, I have to move my content from one setup to another setup. So now I just put it somewhere other than the Canvas system. This is just a link to that file. So here's information about me. My first name is Tak. Last name is unpronounceable in English because some of the sounds is missing in English. So that's why it is actually unpronounceable. But if you really want, it is you can call it Aoyang, or some people miss the U entirely and they call me Ayoung. Okay, well, I mean I think I know they're referring to me, so that's fine. Okay, you can just call me Tak. Okay, Tak is fine. Here's my phone number, email address. Office is kind of dependent on the day, but I think this semester is better. I'm actually in my proper office, every single day from Monday to Thursday. The time is 1:30 to 2:30 on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then on Tuesdays and Thursdays it's 8 to 9 a.m. And then on Fridays, it's online 8 to 9 a.m. as well. But now that this class has started, I might want to move my office hour to right before the class on Fridays. So this way, it's actually easier for you guys to get a hold of me and talk to me. The problem is CMC, for those of you who do not know what CMC is Computer and Math Complex. It is the opposite end of the campus to the north. So it will take you about 5 minutes to walk between here and my office. All right, moving on. This is a full face-to-face class. There are no online components as far as instruction is concerned. So for the most part, you have reading material. Video clips are very limited, if any, okay? But I do record my lectures. So that means if you think, okay, I want to go over that one thing that Tak demonstrated in class, you can go to YouTube and just watch it again, okay? So that's definitely available. And we might have some interactive activities during class. Persistent video clips include closed captioning, and they are distributed through YouTube. I'm only using the automatic closed captioning of YouTube, which is actually really accurate these days. Despite my accent, it is actually pretty good. Okay. So you might want to give it a try and see whether it's okay or not. If you have accessibility needs and require assistive technology and whatnot, you need to talk to the DSPS department to get help. So that's about that. The next section talks about regular effective contact, REC, and communication policy. Basically, it's just saying how to contact me, and I have office hours, I have email, I have phone, and you can also use the LMS text messaging ability. So in Canvas, you can click on my name and send a message to me. So so those are the ways to get a hold of me. Any questions about that? Okay. Time frame is usually within 24 hours. Over the weekend, it might take a little bit longer, up to 48 hours. If you don't get a response from me, it is possible that email just kind of got lost because I get a lot of email, through that particular address. So you just, send me another one, give me a little nudge, okay? Are there any questions about 6.1 time frame? Okay, no questions. 6.2 is, just educate, the usual stuff. Any content, that creates a hostile environment is not going to be tolerated. Cyberbullying is a no-no. Spamming is a no-no. And no offensive content. So that applies not only to communication electronically, but also in-class communication. Okay. Okay. First day of class, okay, which is today. It's really important because if somebody does not show up today, that person can be dropped. So obviously you guys are okay because you're sitting right here, unless you're a hologram, in which case you will not be able to initial name, put your initial on a piece of paper. So I'm hoping none of you is a hologram. What is that? Is that a phone? No, it's not a phone. It's not a phone? No, it's not a phone. Okay. All right, so I'm going to pass this roll sheet around. Just put your initial next to your name. That's enough already, so no need for a full signature. All right, section 8 is about accommodations. If you have visual impairment or hearing impairment and stuff like that, the DSPS department can help. So you need to go to the DSPS department for accommodations. Section 9 talks about excessive absence. The calculation is a little bit different for this class because we are a second 8 only class, and we meet 3 times per week. Okay, but the idea is 6% or more of unexcused absences can be considered excessive, and people can get dropped because of that. Is that okay? So you can do a calculation. So I'm going to do a really quick calculation here. So let's say we have 8 full weeks, which we do not have, and we meet 3 times per week. So we have a total of 24 meetings until the end of the semester. So I'll call it 25, just so that it's easier to calculate. So that means each meeting is comprising about 4% of the entire lecture time for the entire semester. So the first unexcused absence is okay, but the second unexcused absence will bump the unexcused absences to 8%, which is considered excessive already. So you really only have one chance, only one unexcused absence that is affordable for this class. Okay. A full semester class actually has a little bit more leeway because we actually meet more times per semester. Okay, section 10 talks about what is excused. And in this case, only medical reasons can be excused. Jury duty can be excused, but not a whole lot else can be excused. Okay, or I have to excuse that. Now, I do understand things happen in life. Okay, flat tires, the car won't start, alternator died, that sort of thing. So I do understand that. But because this class is compressed, even if I do not drop people, missing one class is quite significant in terms of how much material will be missed. Okay, so technically speaking, all of these are actually unexcused. Religious holidays, family occasions, job interviews. I know a lot of these sounds like, but there are legitimate reasons why I cannot make it to class, but officially they're not excused. Okay, so it is up to me to kind of decide, is it going to be, will I consider that excused or not? Okay, so it doesn't mean that I'm not going to excuse it. It simply means that it is not automatically excused. On the other hand, if you say I was sick, this is a doctor's note, showing that, proving that I was sick on that day, or I cannot even make it to class for the entire week. Fax me a note from the doctor, then I will have to excuse you. Those excuses must be accepted. Okay, late policy for homework is no late policy. I do not accept any late work. Most of the homework assignments are submitted through Canvas. So, Canvas just has a hard deadline. Anything past deadline cannot be submitted. Okay. The next section talks about academic dishonesty or academic integrity, depending on how you want to look at it. I'm just going to look at it from the integrity perspective. So in this sense, the grade of a particular assessment, like a test, homework assignment, exam, final exam, that sort of thing, of a particular student reflects only the academic performance of the student and only of the student who turned in the assessment work. So it's not going to be the academic performance of somebody else. Okay, it has to be of the person whose name is on the submission itself. It is at the approved / scheduled time of the assessment, following all the rules of the assessment as well as general rules already discussed in syllabus, and only using resources that I allow for the test. So I can tell you right away that all of the exams are open book and open notes. Okay, so that makes it a little bit easier. Okay, now letting you know that all the exams are open book and open notes is actually a lot of help, because now as you listen to the lecture, as you study, you can prepare like a condensed version so that you can bring it with you in the exam to help you out. Okay, it is different if it is your own notes, it is condensed, it is different from printing all the material that I have. Okay, because it makes it so much easier. If you wrote the material, it is easier to find. You know where it is. All right, and for the most part, a scientific calculator is also going to be acceptable. So it can be a graphing calculator or really kind of basic scientific calculator, or just a really basic calculator. I really don't see any need of anything. I don't really see a need of a scientific calculator. So anything that's capable of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division should be fine. So the limits test refers to the fact that I reserve the right. Okay, if I suspect somebody is not turning in a test of that person, then I can ask that person to take a second test so that I can reassess whether that person knows the material or not. Okay, I have never used this before. Okay, so I'm hoping that that trend continues, so that I really do not have a need for that. Importance is basically just talking about why I pay attention to academic honesty or integrity. I think you guys know why it's important, right? Okay, so I'm going to ask some of you to tell me why it is important. Yep.
Because if we are using integrity in our academics, then we are not actually learning and selling ourselves short.
Well, but that will only hurt that person who is dishonest. Why would the rest of the class care? Why would I care? Because it takes more work on my part to enforce that, right? So why would the rest of the class care? Anyone? Yep, go ahead.
A grade that exceeds the person's actual capacity, to perform, doesn't reflect properly on the student, and then it just misrepresents your reporting.
Mm-hmm. So let's say I turn a blind eye to all of these activities, okay, and every single person who wants to take the easy way out is going to take my class, and they all graduate, they all move on to UC something or CSU something. Sooner or later, somebody is going to find out. All of these people who got really good grades from tech flunked terribly in our classes. What do you think is going to happen next?
Academic investigation.
Well, that too, but they're going to stop articulating with us. They're going to say, ARC grades do not really matter because it's not useful as an assessment tool. So that's going to affect everybody else, right? I mean, it's not just the student who is dishonest that's going to be impacted, but everybody is going to be impacted. So let me turn it off first because this class is not on my schedule just yet. So I'm going to have to, oh, okay. I actually have it turned on already, but since my wife is on the priority list, her text is still going through. So I'm going to turn off this sound for now. There we go. All right. So consequences, the assessment piece, that I suspect, something bad is happening, will get a 0. The entire thing will get a 0. And repeated cases like this, can be brought up to the dean, and then the dean can bring it to the discipline officer on campus, and then bad things can happen like suspension, expulsion, that sort of thing. Okay. Section 13 talks about the student rights and responsibilities. Because you're in this class, it is likely, or there's a possibility that you are new to the college. And this is probably a good document to read if you're new to ARC or Los Rios in general, because it doesn't talk about just responsibilities. It also talks about your rights. What if I wrongfully accuse someone? I mean, what kind of response can that person consider? Okay, so this document talks about that too. Okay, the grievance process, who to go to, that sort of thing. In the classroom, I think the general idea of this section is really just to talk about distraction is not good. Okay, so try not to do anything that is distracting. That's about it. I mean, like my phone, ringing, that would not be good. So that's about it. I'm just looking to see if this classroom has a no food, no drink, policy. It does not have one, but generally speaking, most classrooms do not allow drinks or food. Okay, so that's why earlier I walked outside to drink my coffee, because I don't want to break my own rules. So if you have some drink, it's okay. I'll give you a break at about 7 o'clock, so you guys can take a break, drink some coffee, drink some caffeinated stuff, and then come back. All right. And over here, I got so in case there are questions, please raise your hand before you answer the question, before you ask the questions. If I ask a question and multiple people have answers, please raise your hand so I can address you so that you can answer the question. Section 15 talks about how to attend lectures. I'll leave it up to you to read this part, okay? Because I think most people know already, but I am just going to include a section like this. One thing about my lectures is because everything is recorded and being streamed to YouTube, as long as it is on the projector, it is recorded. And my voice is recorded as well. Now, you might want to double check occasionally and say, okay, Tag, are we still recording? Because occasionally, I might not have, pressed the button to start the recorder, or the battery of my mic may have died, okay? So it is good to check with me occasionally, just to make sure that it is still being streamed and recorded. Now, because it's recorded, that means there's really no need to frantically write down everything that is on the projector, right? So what do you do then? You got nothing else to do now. What do you do? Okay, listen, and pay attention to what I'm doing, right? So instead of frantically copying everything on the screen to a piece of paper, you just kind of focus on what I'm talking, focus on the concept, and you had a point to make.
Oh, and then if you have like something that sticks out to you, just write that down. You don't have to worry about everything is written up.
Exactly. And particularly record things that are in your own head. Okay, so if you have a moment of going like, oh, now I really understand what this is, okay, write that down, because your thought cannot be projected onto the projector and get recorded. So you will have to write down your own thoughts, okay, as we talk about topics and concepts. The other thing that you also might want to do, not today because the first lecture typically does not have any heavy-duty stuff, is when I start on something like, okay, let's say we are talking about subroutines and I'm talking about recursion, okay? And I say, now today we're going to start a real difficult topic called recursion. It might be a good time to write down the time when I talk about that. Why?
So you can check on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Check on YouTube later.
Exactly, because we know the class starts at 6 o'clock, okay? and I'm usually pretty on time. So if I start to talk about something that's really important and I emphasize quite a few times, then you go like, okay, Tag talked about this at 6:45. So that means, if you want to review that, you don't have to go from the beginning and scan to look for that topic. You know it's going to be at about 45 minutes into the recording. That can save you a significant amount of time when you just need to find that 5 minutes, okay, of something out of 2 hours. Is that making any sense? Okay. So those are the little tricks, for taking classes from me because I have screen recording. Now, if I do not have screen recording, okay, then you might actually need to write down a lot of stuff that I write on the whiteboard. But I don't do anything on the whiteboard, okay? You guys will find out that I use a tablet and a stylus. So whenever I need to write something like this, okay, that is actually important, I would use this. And there's a program that I use to cast the screen of my tablet onto the PC's projection screen. So that means that also gets recorded. Okay, so even when I'm doing something on the tablet, you still do not have to copy it onto your own piece of paper unless you find that there's some extra value for doing that. Okay. All right, moving on. How to succeed in a class. This is a really long section, so I'm not going to read through the entire thing, but I can give you kind of like a summary of what section 16 is about. This class and every single class that I teach is about the understanding of concepts and the ability to apply those concepts in problem solving. So it is not about memorization. It is not about being able to recall exactly how I described something. It is about understanding the concept and then being able to turn around and apply that concept to solve problems. That is the key, okay? So the difficult part, after teaching 18 years or so, I think the most difficult part is whether people realize that there are something they do not understand. Okay? That seems to make the difference between people who are successful in my classes versus people who are not very successful in my classes. And I can't really describe that process, okay? It is just, some people are very good at it. They can kind of sense that, okay, this concept, I really do not fully understand the concept. And they can kind of pinpoint which part is confusing and then ask questions about it. And some other people, do not seem to have the ability to detect it. They can be just as hardworking, okay? This has nothing to do with effort, but it has to do with the ability to understand, to realize, to basically, it's intuition, to realize, hey, I'm not really fully understanding this concept. Tech, can you explain this a little bit more? Or give me a scenario, like scenario A, scenario B, which one, is it, okay? So as we continue with this class, I would try to describe that process. It's kind of like a mental process that's really difficult to explain, but I will try my best to describe it. Because understanding that can really help you with all of your other STEM classes. Because all STEM classes eventually are really about understanding concepts and being able to apply those concepts. So I'm going to move to something that is actually important, grading policy. So most people read this and they think it is not real, but it is real. Okay. So I'm just going to move this back up a little bit. Okay, I think that this part is sufficient. Okay, so what this table is showing you is anyone who's getting less than 12.5% of all possible points at the end of the semester is going to get an F. Okay, I don't think anyone's going to go like, oh man, that is tough. And anyone who's getting between at least 12.5%, but less than 37.5% is going to get a D. Again, I don't think anyone's going to complain and go like, well, man, that's a tough grading standard. Between 37.5% and 62.5% is already a C. Okay, that's a passing grade, and you can move on to the next class. A B is 62.5% to 87.5%. And an A is at least 87.5%. And that's my grading standard. Okay, does it make it easy? Okay, you just shocked the entire class. It doesn't make it any easier because the way I assign these points is truly based on the description here. Okay, and I tried my best to describe what an A means, what a B means, and so on and so forth. So I try to use the typical scoring for tests and exams and homework assignments, and also try to describe the equivalence in job evaluation. Okay, so let's say you're employed by an employer. So what would be an A employee? What would be a B employee? C, D, and F. Okay. And I think all of you can relate to product evaluation. Okay, when was the last time you went to an online merchant to try to buy something and you're evaluating products? A few minutes ago? Maybe even right now? Somebody's doing this under the desk. So you know what a 5-star product is, right? You know what a 4-star product is, and so on. So I'm trying to make an equivalence to all of these things to the actual grade point that we use in grading here. Okay, and I follow these points when I grade your submissions. All right, so activities, how do you earn points in this class? All the homework assignments only add up to 20% of your final grade. Okay, so it's not really a whole lot. Okay, doesn't mean that you shouldn't be trying your best to do it, because the homework assignments are for the most part designed to help you understand the concepts and to get some hands-on experience with those concepts. So it means, what it really means is, okay, let's say you try your best, you do the homework assignment, and somehow you didn't quite get the main concept and you got a 0 for that particular homework assignment. It's still okay because you tried your best, and when I explain the answer, you're gonna get it, right? Because you have just spent like 2 days, to try to figure out what the answer is supposed to be. So when I explain the answer, you go like, oh man, okay, I cannot believe I missed that, okay? But when I explain the answer, you'll get it and you'll remember it, as opposed to somebody who didn't do it. That person would listen to me explaining the answer and go like, oh, okay, and that's about it. So that means, even though the homework assignments do not have a whole lot of point values, not doing homework is going to cost big time, okay? So in terms of exams, there are 3. So one is going to be about 2/3 through the class. The other one is about 2/3 through the class, and then the final exam, obviously, is the last day of meeting in this, because this is a second 8-week class, so that means the last day that we meet is going to be the final exam. We do not have the exam in the final week. And that's why we lose another day. So we're going to lose at least 1 day. We lose 1 day because of Thanksgiving, and then we'll lose another day because of the final exam. Any questions? Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Uh-huh.
Well, we won't have the Friday, but we'll still have Wednesday.
Yes, we still have Monday and Wednesday, but we'll lose the Friday. Because Thanksgiving is we only have time off on Thursday and Friday. All right, and I might give you some ungraded homework assignments. So those are not going to be graded. You would do it, and I'll explain the answer. But I'm not going to collect anything. You're not going to get any point values for that. In other words, they are just opportunities for you guys to do something, to get a better understanding of the concepts. That you do not earn points directly, but by doing the ungraded assignments, you will have a better understanding of the material, the concepts, and whatnot, and that can help a lot when it comes to the exam time. So a lot of the activities that we do may not seem to have a lot of point values, but they all add up, okay? They all contribute to a better understanding of the material, and your real opportunity to demonstrate whether you understand the material or not are the exams, okay? The first exam, second exam, and the final exam, they make up 80% of your points, okay? And somebody is going to realize and go like, oh, but the final exam by itself is 40% of my grade, and I only need 37.5 to get a C, so I can move on to the next class. You're absolutely right about that. Somebody can not turn in any homework assignment, flunk the first, flunk the second exam, ace the final exam, and walk away with a C out of this class and just wave it to me and go like, I got a C. I'm moving on to cisp300. Well, okay, what is the likelihood of that happening? Kind of small, okay? But don't take this as a challenge, because I know some people just love a challenge. This is not me challenging you to not pay attention, flunk everything except for the final exam, okay? I would much rather to see people acing all the homework assignments, ace the first exam, and then decide, I don't need anything else. Or they ace the first and the second exam, do all the homework, get 60%, come here, show up, just squiggle something down for the final exam, get that 62.5% and a B, and then just walk out after like 2 minutes into the final exam. I'm okay. I'm actually okay with that. Not a problem. So is that okay? Yep. That would totally suck, wouldn't it? And that's why, if you look at all the grades, okay, A, B, C, D, F, okay, the worst grade, in my opinion, that someone can possibly get is a C. If someone is getting an F or a D, they don't get to move on, okay? They have to take the class again, possibly from me, possibly from somebody else, but they're not moving on. If somebody gets an A, I don't think they will have too much of a problem in the next class. A B means, well, they probably won't have a lot of problems. It's just that they need to maybe be a little bit more careful, okay? So typically people get Bs because they're not careful. But people who are getting C, who are scraping by to pass this class, the next class is going to be hard again, okay? So that's why, personally, I think C is the worst possible grade to get out of a class. But that's just from my perspective in terms of learning the material, and in the long run, are you ready for the next class? And the class after that, and the class after that. So thank you for bringing that point up. It makes a lot of sense. All right, so the syllabus is done. Okay, I don't really like to spend too much time on the syllabus because it's important, but at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that is just common sense. All right, so we're moving on to the next next main part of the modules, and it's about is computer science for you? How many people here are not in you're not pursuing computer science as a major? You're a math major. Okay, so what are you guys when you're not computer science? Go ahead. Civil engineering.
Oh, I'm just here to experience it.
Okay, all right, that's good. Yep. Okay. Electrical, civil, and who else? Mechanical. Okay, so we have mostly engineering majors who also have to take programming classes. And I'm assuming the rest of the class are in the computer science track. Is that a fair assumption? Okay. Okay, wait a second here. So why do you think engineering requires not computer science, but programming classes? Why is that? Yep.
A lot of the programs used in engineering have custom tools built to take on different projects, and having a programming background will help with that.
Yep. And most tools these days are scriptable, which means if you know how to describe something that is otherwise very tedious and repetitive, you can script it. So you don't have to actually do it manually, which is using a lot of time. The other thing about computer science is, AI or artificial intelligence is actually impacting not just computer science, but it's also impacting a lot of different fields. Engineering, a lot of engineering can now be done in simulation. We used to have to crash test cars, okay, to find out, what design works and what design does not work. How do they do it now? Most of the time. It's done in simulation. You design a car, you crash it in the virtual world, and the simulation is realistic enough to show you, what kind of impact or how the car is going to deform what kind of shock the passenger is going to experience, and so on and so forth. And you don't really have to actually crash a car to find that out. Now, they still have crash test dummies to as the final stage, but they save a lot of time and a lot of material by doing simulation for the most part. If you design, okay, let's think about something as trivial as the heat sink of a processor inside your computer. That seems pretty trivial, right? It's just a piece of aluminum, okay, that you stick onto your processor as a heat sink. Well, the design of those things are actually computer aided now. Okay, so you do a design and then you put it in simulation, and they can show you the temperature gradient of the design based on airflow, based on the heat conductance ability of the material, based on the shape, based on the turbulence that you have between the fins and so on and so forth, and they can show you whether the design works well or not. Okay, that's engineering, but yet it uses computers as a tool. And not knowing how to program, not knowing how to code, is going to, well, you can still be an engineer if you don't know how to how to program and how to code, but you might lose that competitive edge to your peers. That is the issue. Okay, so for the most part, I will still teach the class as if everybody is moving on the computer science track. But I keep in mind that there are some people here who are engineering major, so I'm not going to go too deep into the concepts of programming. Is that okay? All right. Okay, so this section is kind of cool. The first link, I'm just going to open up all these links so that you can see what it is. And this one is really fun. How many people have done this? Oh, I'm kind of surprised that some people have done it already. So this is really cool. You don't have to tell me, okay? There's no homework assignment for you to have to disclose your personality type based on these tests. This is not the only test. This is one that is free, and I personally think that it is actually fairly accurate. So that's why I go like, well, go ahead and take it, but take the result with a grain of salt, okay? So it may or may not be 100% accurate, but nonetheless, it is a tool that can help you understand yourself better. So there's no need to share your result with me or anybody else in the class. If you want to scream out, I'm an ENFP, okay, be my guest, okay? That's fine with me too, but you don't have to. I scream like that because that's one of the traits of ENFP people. They like to share their own feelings, and they tend to be very extroverted. Okay, so this is one resource. And the best thing, one of the things about this resource is you can go to, once you know what type you are, or what types you might be, because sometimes you can say, I'm kind of borderline between this and that type. And it happens, okay? A lot of people are borderline between several types. So let's say you're a INTJ, okay? So you click on INTJ, and it gives you some insights based on what you're interested in. So I would certainly pay some attention to section 2, strengths and weaknesses, as well as career paths. So as far as I'm concerned as a professor of this class, I think it is kind of important for us to understand our strengths and what kind of career paths are suitable based on the personality type. Now, let's click on this career path here. This is for INTJ people. And not surprisingly, INTP people, can get into engineering and stuff like that. But does it mean that an INTJ person cannot be a nurse? No, it doesn't say that. It simply says, those people are, as a group, they're more suitable to do engineering, science, computer science, math, that sort of thing. It doesn't mean a particular individual cannot be a nurse and be successful at it. Okay, so take it with a grain of salt. So that's one thing, and I think you guys will enjoy it, okay? And when you're done with it, you'll ask everybody that you know to do it too. Trust me, I did that. So the next one is about Watson Personality Insight. Now, one thing about the previous one is they ask you 50 questions. And based on your answer to those 50 questions, they do the assessment. But some of those questions is kind of difficult to answer. Okay, one of the questions is if you're in a group setting, okay, and the group is wrong, you are right, but there's group harmony, okay, because everybody else is agreeing. So would you stick your hand out and go like, no, every single one of you is wrong, okay, and explain why they're wrong, but therefore disrupting the harmony? Or would you just sit quietly and go like, just think, you guys are all wrong, but I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to disrupt the harmony? There's one question like that, okay? But it doesn't say what setting you're in, okay? Are you with family and friends? Are you at school? Are you at work? Are you in a meeting, an engineering product design meeting? Because if you're in an engineering product design meeting, you might want to just say, well, you guys are all wrong, okay? It doesn't work this way. And nobody's going to fault you because that's your job, right? As an engineer, it is your job to point out and say, this is not going to work. But in a family meeting setting, you may not want to disrupt it unnecessarily, especially over something that's minor. The question doesn't say whether it's a minor point or whether it's an important point, okay? It can be something as simple as, is soy sauce actually bad for your health? Okay, everybody said, oh yeah, it's really bad, the MSG, no, this is completely artificial stuff. And you in your mind says, it's not artificial. Tomatoes have a lot of MSGs, it's naturally occurring. But do you want to risk, all your relatives, all your brothers, sisters, your parents, looking and go like, why can't you just shut up and agree with us? So it doesn't describe the scenario. It doesn't describe a lot of details. So the test sometimes is not accurate, okay, because of that. Now this is really cool. How many people know what is IBM Watson? Okay, a few, okay. This is the AI engine, that IBM made, and its debut, okay, what was the debut of Watson? What did they use it for? Jeopardy, exactly. So Watson as a computer system was a contestant in Jeopardy, and it was competing against the human champions. They crushed the human, yes, yep. And it was able to understand natural language, so Alex Trebek didn't have to type the question to the computer. He just had to talk. The computer was able to understand natural speech, and it was capable of natural speech to answer the question with a question, okay, to play that game. And all the time, it was not connected to the internet. There was no one behind it pulling all the strings. It wasn't even connected to the internet. It was self-contained, just like every other contestant out there, okay? And it won the game. It beat the other two. So anyway, this is an AI engine, and there are a lot of interesting things you might find with Watson. But in this case, it's a personality. They call it assessment or personality. There's a particular term for that. I cannot remember what it was. But anyway,
Personality insight?
Insight, that's it. Yeah, personality insight. And it does it by writing. Okay, so if you write a lot of things, okay, and that includes email responses to other people, cover letter, for finding a job, and so on and so forth. So what you can do is you can actually go to the second link here, go to body of text, and go to your own text here, and then just kind of paste your writing here. It will need about 2,000 to 3,000 words to be fairly accurate, but it will give you an assessment of your personality based on things that you have written. Now, personally, I think this is a little bit more accurate and trustworthy compared to questions like the 16 personality test, because this doesn't depend on your interpretation of the question. This is based on what you have actually written in the past, okay? And it will give you a very detailed analysis of your personality as well. So it's kind of cool, okay? Now, you still have to take it with a grain of salt because it depends on what kind of writing you feed to it, okay? So I do some answers on Quora. So I copy and paste my answers on Quora to Watson, So it gave me a particular assessment, but that's based on my persona, on Quora when I'm answering questions. So that's not my full personality, but it came pretty close. Most people that I know, fairly well, most people who know me fairly well, when I presented that, they all laughed a little bit, because some of the numbers are pretty extreme, but they all say that it's actually overall pretty accurate. So that's another thing that you can do to kind of get a better understanding of yourself. Okay. This is the third one. Okay, it's not a test. This one is going to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And you look at this and go like, well, but this is for kids, right? K-12, we are just one step beyond K-12, right? More or less. But anyway, this is kind of interesting because it does give you some career exploration type of question. So you can actually look at all the different areas here and click on the ones that you feel interested in. Now, I have a pretty good idea, like almost everybody right here in the classroom is going to click on certain ones, right? Like computers, math, perhaps, science, perhaps, okay? Building and fixing things, perhaps, okay? So I kind of have some idea of which areas you guys are going to click on, but nonetheless, okay, this is an exploration tool, so you might click on something and realize, oh, I never really considered doing this, okay? So it can open up new possibilities. So I want to just give you the tools, to explore possibilities. And here's another one. So this one does focus directly to computer and information technology occupations. So it describes a lot of occupations that are related to computers or computer science. I know this is really all the way zoomed out and you cannot really read the words, but the point is when you click on that link, it will give you a list of occupations that are important today. And I know you cannot read the numbers. So right here, it says entry-level education. In other words, it will tell you what kind of education you need, what kind of education you need to get into that type of career. And on top of that, it will give you the median pay in 2017. So that gives you, some kind of important information that you might or may not know at this point. If you click on each one, it will give you a job outlook. So it will tell you, more details about what kind of degree you will need to get into that occupation, what people do in that type of occupation, but it will also tell you what about in 10 years, do we still have a lot of jobs of that nature? Is it increasing or is it decreasing? So you can have some assessment of, okay, by the time I graduate, are there more jobs of this nature? Are there less jobs of this nature? Or is it going to be about the same as today? So you can make informed decisions when you're choosing your career. Do we have any questions at this point? No? So are these tools kind of new to you, or you guys know this stuff already? Some of them you know, and some of them you do not know yet. Okay. Sorry?
So give or take, yeah.
Give or take, okay. So as long as there's one tool here that you do not know yet, I think it's still it's still helpful. Yep. All right. And the last one, has a title of "A Grain of Salt, Please," for a reason. And okay, this is from Quora. Okay, I didn't write this. Other people responded to this question, and it says the question itself is what MBTI or Myers-Briggs type indicator are computer scientists likely to be? Okay, so the question was not really well formed. Grammatically it could be better, and different people answer it slightly differently. But this is an interesting one. Okay, let me zoom in so you guys can actually see the numbers. Okay, maybe a little less. There we go. So it's based on over and under representation. In other words, they survey, people who are in the computer science field, and they actually count the number of people who are of each of the 16 types. So in this case, you can see INTJ is 3.5. What does that mean? That means they are overrepresented by 2.5 times. So let's say in the entire population, we only have about 2.5% of INTJs, okay? That means within the computer science field, 7.5% or more of those people are INTJs. They are 3x overrepresented. Is that okay? Now, if you look down the list, you go, okay, what about ESFPs? ESFPs are 0.11, they're way underrepresented. So let's say in population you have 10% of all people are in this particular category or ESFP. That means in computer science you only got about 1.1% of people working in that field who are of this type. They are way underrepresented. So that's an interesting table. Okay, once again, take it with a grain of salt, because this is describing people in a group and not individuals. Okay, but it does give you some indications, some pointers. I hope that is actually useful. Now, the other thing that is really interesting about this table is you can see how things are kind of gradual here. There are 3 types that are actually tied. 2.0, which means they are 2x overrepresented, and then there's 1.6 here, and then boop, it dropped to what? 0.56. Do you guys see a pattern? All the ones on top are T types. All the ones below are F types. T is thinking and F is feeling. So apparently, based on these numbers, it does make a difference. Does that mean thinking people do not feel or feeling people do not think? Nope. that would be totally wrong, okay? But it does mean that certain people make decisions based on thinking, based on logic, based on rationality, and other people make decisions based on feeling, emotion, group harmony, and so on. And that is kind of like the dividing line. So this is kind of interesting. I think it's interesting. All right. So moving along. So now we are actually ready to move on to the real material of this class. So let's take a break first, because I need more caffeine, and I suspect some of you may need more caffeine too. So let's refill our caffeine first and come back in about 5 minutes. Would that be okay? Okay. All right. So I'm drinking outside. So is that loaded with caffeine?
Yeah, that is, and then I have my coffee as well.
Okay, I only drink black coffee, so
Same.
that's my sole, only source of
I got really
caffeine.
brewing coffee.
Yep, I just did that today. Yep, right before class. I know a guy who keeps a jet boil in his trunk. So on a trip, just park his car like alongside the highway or just take the exit. He will fire jet boil and coffee and then drink and then get back to the road.
I have like an electric kettle or whatever I keep in my office at work.
Ah.
Like a pour over coffee with my coffee.
It's like, do I want single cup or do I want higher pot?
This is good for me too. I'm cheap. Oh, okay. It's a San Francisco Bay. It's a blend.
Sounds fancy.
It's Costco.
Exactly.
Yeah, I have a Keurig at home, but I use those refillable cups, so I just grind the coffee and then refill. I don't buy the one-use pack.
That's what everyone at work drinks. That's disgusting. The one-use package.
Yeah, mine is not one-use. I have it's a kind of like a small cup. It has mesh, so that so you can reuse it. I've used those for years now. They're still fine. It's a longer class, and that's why I'm giving you guys a break.
I've never actually been on this campus before. So I parked like all the way over there. It's like where
Structure would be the closest. If you park in the parking structure, it's okay. The first class is fine.
I used the CRC a long time ago. Take a little bit.
Who at CRC teaches this class?
I don't know, but he kicked me out because I didn't have Math 120. I'm taking Math 120 right now, and he was like, "No, you take this class." I was like, "Fine."
No, this class does not actually have a prerequisite.
It does in CRC, really, because he was like, "You need to know the equations." I was like, "I did that in Math 100.
What?
And I got an A in Math 100."
Well, okay. Quadratic equation in this class. I mean, that's not needed.
I was at CRC 10 years ago, so I don't know.
I don't know. He kicked me out.
Okay. All right. My coffee's done.
Frank didn't seem like an asshole anyway.
Well, in 2 weeks, you might think the same of me. So.
Not usually. Most of my teachers are pretty good.
I'm going to check my text here. Okay. Okay. Okay, we have a few more seconds to go, so I'm gonna look at the clock. So it shows a 4 at the bottom bar because it's in binary. It's 1, 2, and 4. So when this also turns black, then I know it's 7:05. Then it's time to restart the lecture. It's a binary clock. Yep, there we go. All right, so it's actually a pretty good time to start the actual material for this class now. So we'll start with this introduction slide here. Everything that I do, they are kind of called modules, but I use the term module way before Canvas, so I didn't copy from Canvas. This is actually a term that I used a long time ago. So anyway, all the stuff that I type, that I create, they're all in this particular format, which means there's a PDF version. If you want to print it out and put it into a binder or something, you can go for the PDF version. Or if you want to read the notes, when you're on the phone, the HTML version is actually very mobile friendly. So in class, I'm just going to use the HTML version. But if you want to take a quick look at the PDF version, they have exactly the same content, except it's much more printer friendly because they actually got the page number and stuff like that. Whereas the HTML version is just hyperlinks to the individual sections, but they contain exactly the same content. Okay, so this is your choice. Okay, you can use one for browsing on a mobile device and then use the other one for printing so you can actually read it offline. So it's up to you. So in class, the HTML version is much better because I can just zoom in, especially when we have a pretty small projection screen here. All right, so section 2 of the first module really doesn't say much. Okay, all it's really doing is to explain what an algorithm is and what pseudocode is. So algorithm is kind of a fancy word for methods or way of doing things. Okay, it doesn't have anything to do with a ex-vice president dancing. Some people are getting in, some people are not getting it. Al Gore, rhythm. There you go. And Okay, so algorithm is really just a fancy word of how do we do something. I mean, that's it, okay? And all you guys can now think of is Al Gore dancing, right? Yeah. And so that's algorithm. And then the second word is pseudocode. Pseudocode means, pseudo means what? Fake, not real, okay? And code means, in this case, it means program code, okay? So programming code or programs. So pseudocode means not real program code. So that seems pretty useless, right? I mean, if you have program code, you want it to be real so that you can run it on a computer. So why do we want to have pseudocode? Does anyone want to give it a try? Try to answer the question. Okay, you and then you. Okay, go ahead.
Pseudocode helps you work out ideas to find out the likelihood of what needs to come first, second, third, and final to have code actually operate properly.
Okay, that's good. Yep, go ahead.
It's way quicker to write down and make up than an actual coding thing.
Mm-hmm.
It still conserves the structure of it.
Yep. So you're both right. Okay. So pseudocode is a very useful tool because it has a very loose syntax. Okay. If you miss a semicolon, it's fine. Okay. If you use a semicolon instead of a comma, most of the time it's fine. Okay. If you misspell something, as long as whoever the person who's reading it understand what it's referring to, it's still okay. Okay. So that means you don't have to waste all of your energy to fix the syntax of a program. You can focus on the concept. You can focus on the idea. Okay? So the next question is, well, that is just what you say, Tech. What about the industry? What about computer scientists? Do they agree that pseudocode is a better way to explain ways of doing things, or does everybody else use actual C code, C++ code, or Java code, or JavaScript code to explain things? So to answer that question, I'm going to point you to a fairly well-known, but it's an algorithm that is well-known for the wrong reasons. It's called bubble sort. And we'll go to Wikipedia. Okay. And then we go to implementation. And guess what? It uses pseudocode to describe the algorithm. Instead of using a particular actual programming language, it just uses pseudocode. Okay? So that means pseudocode is a fairly well-accepted standard in computer science to describe ways of doing things. Is that okay? So why do I choose pseudocode in this class as the programming language? Because you guys, most of you, okay, I think all of you, are moving on to cisp300, which is C++ programming. So the question is, why don't I use C and C++ as well in this class? Well, just like what you explained a little bit earlier, I don't want you guys to have to worry about the syntax, because that really distracts from the train of thought. And then the second thing is, I don't want you to run the program on the computer. What? If I don't run the computer on the computer, where am I going to run that program? What do you think? What is the original computer? Hmm? In your heads, with the help of a piece of paper, yes. So I need you guys to run programs on a piece of paper so that you can show me that you understand the concepts. So if I give you a program, okay, and I ask, what do you think this program is going to do? Show me you understand what this program is going to do. Well, if I let you run the program on the computer, you just kind of present the output of the computer and go like, okay, this is what the program did. But do you understand why it did that? No, I just type run. Well, that's not good for the next class. So instead of that, I need you to show me step by step, okay, how did the program accomplish what it just did? So if you can show me step by step how we got the job done, then I'm confident that you understand those concepts. So that's the reason why in this class we use pseudocode, and the code that we use in this class cannot ever be run on a computer. It doesn't stop people from translating the pseudocode into actual C, C++, or Java code and run it on an actual computer. If you want to do it that way, that's fine. It's not a problem. But in the tests, when I test you, you are going to run the program in pseudocode. line by line and show me what each line of code is actually doing. Okay? So that is kind of the focus of this class. Let me explain that, why, the importance of that in a slightly different way. So let's say I'm not teaching computer science, I'm teaching skills and other things as for contractors, people who build houses and stuff like that, okay? So the question is, let's say somebody is totally green, comes in and go like, I want to be a contractor. So do you think on day one, I'm going to give that person a circular saw? No, probably not. What about a high-speed drill? Probably not, right? So what I want that person to do is what?
Safety systems.
Hand drills, okay? Yeah. And then the other point is, do you think I will ask that person to design something like, build me a doghouse? Here's the plan. Follow the plan, build me a doghouse. Most likely not, because the doghouse may end up as a trap that is not so humane. Because of the nails, sticking out, and then the whole thing will collapse when an animal enters that. So may not be such a good idea. So this class is really about the familiarization of tools. Okay? The next class will get you the opportunity to actually write your programs. So in this class, you might get a little bit of that, but not a whole lot. Okay? All right, so with that out of the way, we are now actually going into the material of this class. And we start with variables, assignment statements, expressions, and sequences. I don't think this is going to be a very difficult topic, but we'll go ahead and get it started here. So the example is really simple. I'm paying my bills, okay? So I'm paying my bills, and these are the following tasks. So I opened up my credit card bill. Now, remember, I wrote this about 14 years ago, so I was still getting paper bills at the time. Okay, these days I don't get paper bills anymore. So you open up the envelope, you get your paper, you get your credit card bill, and we assume the balance is X dollars. Is that okay? So are there any problems? Are there any questions about what this X is representing? It's just a placeholder, right? Because that amount changes month to month. When it gets closer to December, it might go up, right? So we'll assume the balance is X dollars. I write a check of X dollars to the credit card company, and of course this is also written when online payment was not as popular as today. I will deduct X amount from available funds because I want to keep track of how much money I have left in the bank. This is in the good old days. This you have to do it manually, and there are still people who do it manually, on a checkbook too. And then I'll add X to the annual total expense for that particular credit card because I want to track, how much money I have spent through that particular credit card. Is that okay? All right. So that's a very simple algorithm. But in this particular algorithm, I'm trying to explain what is the concept of a variable. So a variable, as the name implies, okay, is made out of vary, which means change, and able is can, okay, which means it can change. So a variable just basically says, okay, something that can change. But in programming, a variable has certain attributes. So every single variable has a name. Why do you think a variable needs a name?
Keep track of it.
To keep track of it, okay. But, okay, I think you're implying something, you just didn't say it.
There are multiple variables.
Exactly, because you have to track variables amongst multiple variables. So each one needs to have a unique name so that you can identify which variable you're talking about. So that's what the name is for. Now the name of a variable sometimes is also called the identifier of a variable. So in C and C++, it's called the identifier. But basically it's just the name. Depending on the programming language, it also has a type. So in general, in C and C++ programming, there are several main types. One type is called integers, and the other type is called floating point numbers. Floating point numbers can represent fractions, and then integers can only represent integers. Okay, but in this class, we're mostly just using integers, so the type is not really a major issue in this class. And the last part is the most important part. What is the value that this particular variable is storing? Okay, and that can change over time. So the name doesn't change over time, the type usually doesn't change over time, but the value most likely will change over time. Okay, so let's move on and talk about how this particular example uses variables. So now we're going to identify the variables that we have used in the previous example. Now x is a pretty obvious variable, because depending on which bill I'm opening up and pay, x is going to be different. Okay, it is very, very unlikely that I have exactly the same balance from one month to another month, right? Okay, so x is a variable. Its value does not change as we perform those steps, but from paying the bill this month and paying the bill next month, that x is going to change. Is that okay? All right. The type is money, but in this case, that's actually not very important. Now we do have two more variables. The next variable is available funds. In other words, how much money do I still have as cash? Okay, because when that goes down to 0, I'm in big trouble. Okay, cash flow management is kind of important. Okay, but why do I write available funds in this kind of funky way? Available and then uppercase F with no space in between. This is called camel case. Camel case is used in most programming, in most situations of programming these days. So camel case basically means you put all the words together, and then you use an uppercase for each word to indicate the beginning of that word. And the first letter of a variable is usually a lowercase. Now, is that enforced by the compiler? Is it enforced by actual tools? No, but it's more like a best practice in industry. So you want to name your variables using camel case when you work in industry. So that's why available funds is not written as available and then space and then funds. Now, I understand some of you know that the underscore character usually can be used as a part of a variable name, but people don't do that either. Okay, so in other words, people do not say available underscore funds. That is just not used. They use camel case instead. And then the other variable is the total expense of a particular credit card. So in this case, I'm making the assumption that I'm using American Express, and I'm tracking the total expense, total annual expense of my American Express credit card. Okay? Are we doing okay so far? So we have three variables. X is the balance of a particular month. Available funds is how much money I have in cash in my checking account. And then AE total expense tracks my annual total expense going through that one credit card, which I don't have anymore. Because when Costco switched to Visa, my AE credit card becomes totally useless. Oh, okay. I thought we had a American Express employee here going like, what? Okay. So the algorithm is pretty easy, right? X is the balance, so I subtract X from available funds, and then I add X to AE total expense. That's kind of summarized, what summarizes what I need to do. But it looks kind of confusing because I use that left arrow symbol instead of equal symbol. Can anyone think of why I do not use the equal symbol like all programming languages? Yep.
So I messed with TeamReader a little bit, and I'm guessing that you're trying to separate like the double
Equal
versus the
comparison.
yeah.
Yep, exactly. So let me see if I can use my tablet here. Just need to change the orientation. Okay. Let's see. Let me go find that. Okay, we can do it here. So I'm casting the screen of my tablet onto the projector right now. And I just need to add a notebook for this class. We'll call it cisp300. Oops. Okay, there we go. So now I can actually use just a pencil to write whatever I need to write here. Okay, so I'm going to ask you in a math class, okay? So assuming that you're not in a programming class, you're in a math class. What does that mean? What do you think a professor wants to convey when the professor writes down x equals y? They're the same, or asking whether they are the same. So it's either an assertion that x and y do have the same value, or it's a question of whether x and y have the same value. But nonetheless, it is still a comparison. Is that okay? So using that semantic, using that particular meaning of equal to, and you ask your math professor. Do not ask a computer programming professor, but ask your professor and ask, what does that mean? What do you think a math professor is going to do? Your math professor will look at you funny and go, it's not going to be true. This is going to be false. No matter what x has, this is false. Cannot be true. Why do you think your math professor is going to say that?
Because the variable x is set to a specific thing, and if you add 1, it will never equal x because 1 plus x is
Yep.
not going to be x.
Yep, because your math professor is still using the interpretation that equals means comparison. You are trying to confirm whether the left-hand side and the right-hand side are the same or not. Now, in mathematics, with very basic algebra, you can say, what if I subtract x from both sides, right? So one side becomes 0, one side becomes 1, and then your professor goes like, that's false, okay? Now, it doesn't mean it is senseless. It simply means that this particular expression is always false, which means it's kind of useless, okay? It doesn't mean it's crazy. It just means it's useless, okay? It's always false. But when you ask a computer programming instructor, then x gets x plus 1 is a little bit different. And that's because we are using the equal symbol incorrectly. Okay? It should never have been using the equal symbol. Okay, so switching back to the notes here. Now don't tell your other programming professors that, okay? I don't want to upset anyone. So that's why in this class, okay, assuming that people do not really have a programming background, I use the left arrow to mean assignment. In other words, evaluate the right-hand side, whatever that becomes, use it to update the left-hand side. Okay, so whenever you see the left arrow, it means assignment operation. And that's basically what section 4.1 is talking about. It simply means that every time you see a left arrow, it's going to have a left-hand side LHS and a right-hand side RHS. Right-hand side is evaluated first. It comes to a particular value, and then you use that value to update the left-hand side. So the left-hand side has got to be a variable of some kind, because otherwise, what are you updating? Is that okay? Is that making any sense so far? Or are there any questions at this point? No questions? Now, can they refer to the same variable? In other words, can the right-hand side and the left-hand side have exactly the same variable? That seems kind of confusing, don't you think? Okay, so let me switch to the tablet here. So if I say x gets x plus 1, okay, then it seems to be a circular reasoning, because we evaluate the right-hand side, which is x plus 1, comes out to a value. We update the left-hand side, but doesn't that mean that we have to re-evaluate the right-hand side and update the left-hand side again until everything becomes stable? Nope. We only evaluate the right-hand side once. We take whatever value it evaluates to, and then we update the left-hand side. Whether the right-hand side and the left-hand side refer to the same variable or not does not matter. Okay? So, yes?
So does this apply to when we read a bunch of code,
Mm-hmm.
read from right to left instead of left to right, or I don't understand?
Only when it comes to assignment operations, you evaluate the right-hand side first. So the order of operation in this case is to first evaluate the right-hand side. Whatever value it becomes, you use it to update whatever variable is on the left-hand side.
So you're giving us a concept now, remember, for later.
Yes.
So you're going to tell us when to apply this particular method.
Yes. Yep. So this is the most basic kind of thing that we can do in a program, is to change the value of a variable, and this is how we do it. Okay? So let me just kind of repeat that particular sentence. When we want to change the value of a variable, this is how we do it. An assignment operation is the way to change the value of a variable. Is that okay? Okay, all right. So, oops. Moving on to the notes. Okay. So the one kind of assignment operation that is kind of easy to understand is a constant assignment, which means on the right-hand side, it is just a particular number. It's a constant. So, well, I mean, what this statement is going to do is really quite simple. All it's going to do is to say, let's overwrite the current value of AE total expense and change it to 0. That's all it's going to do. Now, but you have to keep in mind, once you overwrite the value of a variable, it's gone forever. There's no way to go back in time or to look at the variable and ask it, what was your previous value before the update? It doesn't know. It can only keep one value at a time. So after an assignment operation, a variable cannot remember its previous value anymore. Is that okay? All right, yep, go ahead.
So why don't you equate it instead of assigning?
Because equating it using the equal symbol suggests that we are comparing. So when you're comparing, you're not really changing one side or the other. You're asking the question of, are they the same or not? You're not making them the same. So the left arrow symbol, also indicates the order of operation. You evaluate the right-hand side. Whatever value is coming from your right-hand side, you use that to update the variable on the left-hand side. Okay? That's a good question.
What did you say that when you update it, it loses the value forever? Or
Correct.
not?
So once you update it, it's gone forever. So kind of imagine this. Imagine you have a little Post-it, okay? And let's make it a little tiny whiteboard about yay big, okay? So I ask you, okay, so go ahead and erase whatever the little whiteboard has. Gone, right? And then I say, okay, the new value is now a 0. So you put a 0 onto that tiny little whiteboard. When I say add 1 to that value, then you go like, okay, it's 0 right now. Add 1 to 0 is 1. And then I ask you one more time, okay, now overwrite the value on the whiteboard with the new value. So now the 0 is gone because you have to erase the 0 first before you write down the 1. So when you're looking at the whiteboard with 1 on it, you cannot know that it had a value of 0. The whiteboard has no memory of the previous value. Is that okay? Sort of? Maybe?
Well, I was just thinking, like, if I'm doing that with code or something like that, then I'm just going to keep track of my other variable for if I have to have it back later.
Could you ask that question again?
So if I'm coding or something and this comes up in a line of code somewhere, then
Mm-hmm.
I just keep track of my 0.
It basically, it's,
Write it down or something, or post a sticky note on my desk, or
it means the value of the variable is now a 0. Once this statement executes, then the original value of AE total expense is gone, and the current value of AE total expense becomes 0. So the next time you refer to AE total expense, it's 0. Is that okay? Okay, all right. So the next one, section 4.3, talks about this construct, which we have seen already. but it's still worth mentioning again, because this one is what I call your self-referencing assignment, which means the right-hand side and the left-hand side refer to the same variable. So it can potentially cause confusion, because now the question is, if we are updating AE total expense to what it had earlier, plus 1 plus x, do we need to go through this whole thing again? And the answer is no. The update is a one-shot deal. Okay, so once you evaluate the right-hand side, update the left-hand side, you are done. You move on to whatever is next. Okay, so that's basically what this section is really talking about. The next section is talking about how do you visualize, how do we visualize the changing of the value of a variable. In other words, basically how you turn in homework assignments. Okay, so the way we do it, or the way that I want you to do it, is to use a table like this. The table is going to have at least one column that indicates the line number, because I need to know which line is doing what to which variable. So you will need a column of line number. The pre is a shorthand of a precondition. In other words, what do we know about these variables at the beginning of the algorithm? Do we have any assumptions? Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Like in this case, we do have some assumptions. So in this particular case, we are assuming that my piggy bank had $261 to begin with. It's an assumption. Don't ask me why I made that assumption. It's just an assumption because it's an example. And I'm also assuming AE total expense was 0. In other words, this was January. Okay, I just reset that annual amount, so it was a 0. So row 1, the pre-row, is really just the precondition. It's asking, or it's answering the question of what can we assume about these variables. Are we good on that one? Okay. The next row with a 1 is indicating, oh, after line 1 executes, what's going to happen to the variables. So the 1 on this row here is basically indicating the following is the result of executing line 1. It is the post condition of executing line 1. Are we clear on that concept? What is a pre and post condition? Precondition is the condition before, post condition is the condition after. Okay? What does line 1 do? Well, line 1 says available funds gets available funds minus x. So how do we evaluate that line again? Right to left, exactly. So we evaluate the right-hand side. The right-hand side is available funds minus x. Available funds was 261, okay? X, oh, okay, darn it, I really should have x somewhere. So x is 71, okay, so there should be one extra column here with x in it. So 261 minus 71 is 190. So we take the right-hand side, the value of the right-hand side, we update the variable on the left-hand side, which in this case so happens to be available funds again. So that's why it got updated to 190. Does line 1 do anything to AE total expense? Does it mention it even? Nope. If something does not appear on the left-hand side of an assignment, it doesn't get updated. So in this case, we just copy it, okay? But when we get a lot of variables, this can take a long time. So at that point, we'll say, if you just leave it blank, I assume that it has not changed. But at this point, I just want to make it very clear, we have not done anything to AE total expense, and that's why when after line 1 executes, AE total expense still has a value of 0. So that becomes the post condition of line 1. What about line 2? What does it do? Well, let's read line 2. Line 2 says AE total expense gets AE total expense plus x. We know x is 71, okay? So we are saying, okay, AE total expense was a 0, plus 71, which is x, it becomes 71. 71 is the value on the right-hand side. What do we do with that value on the right-hand side? Update the thing on the left-hand side. So if you look at line 2, the variable on the left-hand side is AE total expense, Well, it so happens to be the same variable that we mentioned on the right-hand side, but don't let it stop you. So now we update AE total expense to 71, and that's the end of the trace of this rather simple sequence of operation. So are we okay so far with the concepts up to this point? Okay, so we know what a variable is, we know what an assignment is, we know how to evaluate an assignment operation, and we know how to show the progress of the program by using this particular method. Yes?
Just to be clear, for the first line of the algorithms,
Uh-huh.
like it's the pre-state, and then you apply algorithm 1.
Correct. Line 1 of the algorithm.
So line number 1 is sort of like the result at the end of the algorithm.
Yes.
Algorithm 1. Okay.
Correct. So on each row of this table, it is describing the values of the variables after that line executes, not before. So how do we know what it looks like before? Well, the previous line will tell you that. So this kind of trace is kind of helpful because if you look across a single row, it's telling you the value of each and every single variable in your program based on that slice of time. Okay, so each row is representing a slice of time. It tells you everything that you need to know about the program at that particular slice of time. When you look at a column, it's giving you a history of a variable, how it got changed over time. So you might think, but Tech, didn't you just say that a variable cannot remember its previous value? That is absolutely correct. This is just a log of how the value of a variable changes, but it is not actually represented in a variable. Is that concept okay? It's kind of like, okay, so what you're seeing, what you're hearing right now is in the present, okay? There's only one of me, and I'm standing right here. But if you have been recording this lecture, let's say there's a camera in the back of the classroom, and you roll back, the film, okay, roll back the tape, then you can see me, moving from here to there and there, back to here, and so on. So there's a historical record of where I have been, but at the present moment, I can only be at one place at any particular time. Is that concept okay, or did I just make it more confusing? Is okay? All right. Because sometimes I explain things and it actually makes it worse.
So I have a quick question.
Yes, absolutely.
Why does it look like you have to read it from right to left and then from bottom to top?
From bottom to top.
Well, because the available funds is 261 and the two numbers on line 2 are equal to that.
So in this particular table, this row here is telling us what assumption are we making about the variables before the first line of the algorithm executes. The second row, this row here, is telling us the state of the variables after line 1 executes. And then the last row, which is this one here, is telling us the state of the variables after line 2 executes. So the cumulative effect of both line 1 and line 2 is reflected on the row that I'm highlighting right now. Is that good? Is that okay so far? Okay, so if you look at this as a film, okay, each row is one frame. And then but remember the present is only one particular frame, and that's the last frame that we are looking at. Okay? So are we okay so far with this? Okay? All right, so we are moving on to the next module. The next module is called Conditions and Conditional Statement. So the first question is, why do we need conditional statements? Why is that useful? Well, because if you only have assignment statements, then what can you do? You can change the value of variables, okay, that's cool. You can do all kinds of calculations, okay. Somebody mentioned a quadratic equation, and yes, you can do you can solve quadratic equations using just assignment statements. That's cool. You can do certain types of calculations. But is that all we want computers to do? Is to go crunch numbers and just say, okay, these are the variables coming in. I just need you to do the calculations as the output. No, we need computers to do what? What is one thing that is kind of important for computers to do besides just crunching numbers? Hmm? So, say that one more time. Free. Create algorithms. Well, we are not quite, computers are not quite smart to that point that it can create its own algorithm yet, because if it can, why are we doing here? What are we doing if computers can program themselves, right? Now that day will come, just not yet. Okay, so we are hoping that we will still get employed after graduation.
Hmm?
Okay, but the main question is, why is sequences not enough? What else do we need? Yep, go ahead.
We need to check if certain conditions are met before
we need to make decisions. Okay, we need to make decisions sometimes. Okay, even in the calculation of something, we still need to make decisions. What do you mean by that? Okay, so let's think about the algorithm to find the maximum of two variables. Okay, so I'll write this down on the tablet. Okay, just so that we can see it. Okay, so let's say we have variable x. It has a value of 5. We have variable y. It has a value of 6. Okay, and this is the precondition. And then we have a variable called max that I want to store the maximum of the two variables. Okay. Well, you guys all know the answer, right? In this case, 6 is the maximum. So if I only have, let's say, I don't know how many lines of code we want to write here. So let's just say that we have, blah, 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 and then we down to the last line of this program, n. I want max to be 6 in this case, because 6 is the maximum of 5 and 6, right? Okay. So now we present another scenario to the computer program, same program, okay? The program has not changed. But this time, x starts with the precondition is that x has a value of, let's say, 16, and y has a value of 2 to begin with. Max is unknown at the beginning. And then when the program concludes, this time, what do you think I should have as the value of max? It should be 16. Okay, so if you think about this, and you say, if all we can do are assignment statements, can we get this done? Nope, we cannot get this done because there's a little decision process here that says if x is the larger one, we want max to be x. If y is the larger one, we want the max to be y. So it becomes conditional. In other words, we need a way to make a decision. Now, how do you make a decision? Well, you have to ask a question. If the answer to that question is true, you do one thing. If the answer to that question is false, you do something else. That is the basis of a conditional statement. So are we okay so far with the rationale of why a sequence of assignment statements is not really quite enough to do what we want computers to do? Okay. All right, so going back to the notes. So a condition is really a question. Okay, so if you want to remember what a condition is, it's a question. But the answer to that question is limited to true or false. In other words, the answer to that question is Boolean, B-O-O-L-E-A-N. Why is it called Boolean? Does it have anything to do with being bold? Well, yes. Yes, whose last name is B-O-O-L-E. Exactly. So that's why it's called Boolean. Okay. So Boolean means it is either true or false. Okay. So what kind of expression is Boolean? What kind of expression always has an answer of either true or false? Well, that's the very definition of conditions. So I want more specific. Okay, what type of expression are we talking about? Say that one more time. Binary expressions. So when you say binary expressions, are you referring to the expression has two sides to it, or are you referring to you're only working with zeros and ones? Two sides. Okay. So, but there are many expressions that are not Booleans. Okay. So addition is not Boolean. Doesn't give you a Boolean answer. Why? Because what is 3 plus 4? It's 7. Is 7 true or false? Technically, it is neither. Okay, so addition doesn't work. What about less than? Okay, let's say 3 less than 4. What is the answer of 3 is less than 4? It's true. Okay, cool. What about 4 is less than 3? It's false. Okay, so less than as an operator is a Boolean operator because it gives us an answer that's either true or false. So what other operators would give us a true or false type of answer? Equal to, yep. And this is why I do not like to use an equal symbol in assignment, because that's just confusing. Okay, we have not equal to, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, and are we still missing anything? Yeah, just greater than. Okay, we are missing that one. So there are basically 6 comparison operators that we are already familiar with. Okay, that's kind of cool. So the next question is, can we combine these things in a certain way? In other words, I got one thing that's either true or false. I got one more thing that's either true or false. Can I combine these two in a particular way that is meaningful? And how would you do that? Less than or equal to. So the keyword is or, okay? So those are Boolean operators. In other words, you give it a value that is Boolean to begin with, you give it another value that's a Boolean, and it gives you a third value as a result that is also Boolean. Okay? Those are called Boolean operators. Now, it sounds really fancy, but you have been using all those concepts since, I would say, maybe 4 or 5 years old. Okay? So what concepts are we talking about? We're talking about the English word and, or, not. So are those words new to anyone in this class? No. And how long have you been using those words? Can you remember when you learned to use those words? Tell me one thing that you can describe, today, okay, that makes use of those words. Just pick any one, okay? So and or not. Pick one of those and tell me an example. Give me an example. Okay, and is something, yep, go ahead.
I walked my dog and I had breakfast.
So does that mean that you did both? Yep, that's what the word and means, okay? What about or? How do you use the word or in a colloquial sense? Yep.
I told my son, you have to pick up your toys or you can't play your video games.
Okay, so that means at least one of those two have to be true. Now, in that sense, that or is actually or else. Okay, so it's a little bit different from the actual logical or that we use in programming. Okay, let's say you walk into McDonald's. Okay, and they have a big, huge promotion going on, and they say that if you order a Big Mac or give me another product, McChicken, okay, you get this totally useless plastic toy. Okay, that's the promotion. Okay, what does that mean? Well, that means if you purchase at least one of these two products, you get a free toy, right? It also means that if you do not purchase at least one of these two products, you do not get that toy. Is that okay? So we use those words a lot. Now, what about that word but, B-U-T, but? What do you think is the meaning of that word? Hmm? It highlights a contrast, okay? It highlights, some contrasting properties, but it really has the same meaning as the word and. Think about it. Think about a situation where you use the word but, okay? And then you think, could I have used the word and in terms of logic, in terms of the meaning? You might lose that kind of contrasting effect, but is the logic, is the meaning changed? Okay, give me an example of using the word but and substituting and is still gonna work.
You can take this detour, but it will be longer.
Exactly. So it is a detour and it is longer. You could have used the word and, but using the word and is going to lose that contrasting, hint, when you use that word. Okay. So that means we have been using all of these words, all along. What about that word not? You cannot do it. Okay. What does that mean? It is not true that you can do it. It's the negation. Okay. So those are the things that we already know. Okay. So I'm going to add it to the list here. So we know the word and, we know the word or, we know the word not. Now I'm going to introduce the mathematical symbol for all of these things, and it's called conjunction. It looks like this in mathematics. Or is called disjunction. It looks like this in mathematics. And the not is the funny one. It looks like this in mathematics. Now remember, the tests are open book and open notes, which means what you really need to do is to find out which part of my notes explains the symbols, and make sure that you bring that with you in case you need to remember these things. Okay, so they're no big deal. It's really just a matter of, okay, what symbol is representing what. Okay, that's basically the bottom line. So now we are looking at all of these things, and I'm going to give you a challenge. I'm going to give you a challenge and say that, what if I give you a programming language that can only compare using less than? In other words, the only way to relate two values is to see whether they are less than or not. There's no greater than, there's no equal to, there's no different from, and there's no less than or equal to, and there's no greater than or equal to. But I do allow you to use and or not in any way you want, okay? And they can even be nested. In other words, you take something that's ended, and then you OR it with something else that's also ended, and so on and so forth. So what do you think? Can we get away with just one single comparison called less than?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So we got a confirmation here. All right, so we'll go ahead and just express those operators. X is less than y is really the same thing as, no surprise, x is less than y. What about x is greater than y? How can we only use less than? Y is less than x. Okay, y is less than x. Okay, that's pretty easy. What about x is greater than or equal to y? I can only use less than, but I can use and or not. You guys are overthinking. Y is okay. X is not less than y. Okay, very good. So it says, okay, I'm going to use the word not, just so that, because we are not familiar with the math symbol yet, so I'm just going to use the word not, okay? It is not the case that x is less than y. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm just going to pause here. Yep.
How would that look in the actual symbol?
In the math symbol is going to be kind of like a cliff, like that.
Over the x's?
No, it's just going to be before that. So yeah, I can do it on the side too. It's just going to be that. Okay. All right. Well, the next one is going to be easy, because once we know one, the other one is really just flipping it, right? So this is not y is less than x, okay? Or negation of y is less than x. Okay, so now we got all the easy ones. Time to work on some of the harder ones. X does not equal to y. How do we say x does not equal to y when all you can do is to compare for less than? Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Go ahead.
X is less than y and y is less than x.
Not and, because or, that's it. Yep. There we go. So we have x is less than y, or y is less than x. Or using math symbols, it is x is less than y, and then the or looks like a v. Y is less than x. What about equal to? I save the best for last. No, well, you cannot change it to an and, because if you change the or to an and, then it is always false.
Or you can write just not.
You have to say not and then the and.
Not x less than y. And
I'm going to do it in a very lazy way, as you will find out that I'm really quite lazy. Can I do that? Yes? Okay. If I already know what is x does not equal to y, I just need to copy and paste that section here, right? And I'm done. Now, there is an alternative form to this, because you can also say, okay, I'm going to use extra parentheses just for clarity. It's the same thing, but it's less obvious, okay? The last form is less obvious. But hey, we can actually get away with one single comparison operator. If we know how to find out whether something is less than something else, we don't need the other comparison operators. We good so far? Okay. In my head right now, I'm evaluating whether I want to give you another challenge. Okay, there's one operator that I have not talked about in this class. It's called a NAND, N-A-N-D. It's the negation of an AND. Okay, it means not AND. Okay, and that operator, I think I'm not going to get into it, but I'll just say it. Okay, if I give you that one single operator called NAND, which is the negated version of AND, you don't need or, you don't need not, you don't need and anymore. That one single Boolean operator can replace and or not. So that means with one single comparison operator less than and one single logical operator called NAND, we can do everything. We can express every condition that we need to express in programming. Yep. Okay, I was trying not to. Okay, so now you guys want to know. Okay, I like that. And we got about 5 minutes. You know, it's really not enough time to really get into a new topic. So this is kind of neat to do. Okay, so this is called NAND. Okay, so NAND is really, okay, let me give you what it, by definition, what it means. Okay, so if I have x here and I have y here, it really is the same thing as just a negation, not, of x and y. That's all it means. Okay. Now it's not an operator that you would use on a normal conversation with somebody else, because we just do not use that word a lot in our own language. Okay. So if you're only given this, how do you do a not, like a single negation? Not x is really the same thing as x NAND x. Okay? Why? Because it is the same thing as the not of x and x. X and x is x. Now, I will explain the truth table next time so that we get a better definition of what is and, what is or, and what is not. So this part of the lecture is really just to show you that there is such an operator that is quote-unquote universal. It can replace all of the other Boolean operators. Okay, so what about just x and y, normal x and y? Oops, I said y and I wrote x. Okay, x and y. That really is, now this one is already a little bit funny. Is x NAND y the whole thing NAND X NAND Y. Okay, well, I'll show you, next time, okay? What about X or Y? X or Y. X or Y, okay, this one I have to think about it a little bit. Oh, I remember now. It is X NAND X, the whole thing NAND, Y NAND Y. So using a single awkward Boolean operator called NAND, we don't need the not, we don't need the and, we don't need the or anymore. So now the biggest question is, so how come in most programming languages we do have all 6 comparisons and also and or not as our Boolean operators? Readability, very good. Okay, so I'm so glad that someone mentions readability. Just because we can doesn't mean it's a good idea. Okay, so if it is not a good idea in this context, why do I even bother to mention NAND? And why is it important? It would be useful for people who design the silicon of processors and other computational equipment. Because at the lowest level, okay, what is inside the computer? Well, what is inside the CPU? What is inside the microprocessor? Chips. Okay, what is inside the chip? Transistors. I like that answer. Okay, so when you use a microscope, so think about this kind of magical microscope that can zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. Okay, at the very last level, that is actually useful to us, is the concept of a transistor. Okay, a transistor is basically a valve. Okay, it can open and close. Okay, it can allow flow or stop the flow. That's basically what a transistor is. So using 4 transistors, I can implement a NAND gate. Only 4 transistors. How small is a transistor these days? Does anyone know? That is not specific enough. They are pretty small, but small is all relative. So what is the size of a transistor in a cell phone? They're measured in nanometers, but how many nanometers? With Intel process, I think it's down to what, 14 nanometers?
Right now they're reaching 7 nanometers.
Yes, 7 nanometers is the smallest transistor that we have today. So we have small, and then we have small. When I was in graduate school, which was kind of a long time ago, but not that long ago, okay, a micron was considered impossible. In other words, people were talking about, well, can we actually make transistors that is 1 micron in terms of length? Then you go like, well, what exactly is 1 micron? 1 micron is 1 micrometer, as opposed to a nanometer that we use today. So how does 1 nanometer compares to 1 micrometer? 1,000. So 1 nanometer is 1,000th of a micrometer. So it was only in the 90s that people thought it would not be possible to shrink a transistor smaller than 1,000 nanometer. And we are now at 7 nanometers. Is that kind of giving you the kind of progress that we have made? Now, you might say, but Tack, you're old, so you're talking about really, really old stuff. Well, it was in the 90s. I do admit that I am, that's before some of you guys were born, okay? But from the 90s to here, which is only about what, 20, 30 something, 30 years, 29 years, okay? 29 years is not that long of a time, okay? If you take a car, okay, like an automotive, a car from the 90s, and you compare it side by side to a car that was manufactured yesterday here, well, yes, the new car is better. Better gas mileage, better safety, better traction control, blah, 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 blah. But is it that much better? Not that much better. Because we are talking about 1,000 nanometer to, let's say, 10, okay, 100-fold smaller, right? So our cars are 100-fold more efficient compared to 30 years ago. No, they might be like maybe 20% or something like that, not even twice. So we are talking about huge progress over time when it comes to silicon. I know it's time to leave. You guys are trying to go home for dinner. So as you are driving home, okay, don't drive and use your phone at the same time, but keep this one in your mind and just look it up. It's called Moore's Law. Okay, look up Moore's Law, and then on Monday we'll talk about it because it really is significant. That's what's driving. That's what makes computer stuff so much different from everything else. All right, so I'm gonna let you guys go today and read ahead of me in Canvas, so we know where we are at this point. So read ahead of me, and I'll see you all on Monday. No homework except for the reading.
Sorry.
Uh-huh.
I got the app.
You got the app.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, wait, let me get it.
Oh, don't forget to do initial.
Okay.
Okay, let me stop the recorder first, because otherwise everything that I say now will still be